Hello and welcome to this Bio43 pre-lab video. In this video, we are going to continue our discussion on effective science writing, focusing on the methods and results sections. Looking at the rubric, the methods section doesn't have its own category associated with it, the way argument is linked to introduction and evidence is linked to results. But parts of the authority and structure/prose categories apply here. The methods section has a clear goal. Allow someone familiar with the field to replicate your experiment. So your normal target audience of new Bio43 students might have a little trouble with this section at first. But after they go through their first cilia function experiment, they should have a pretty good idea of how your procedure works from reading this section. However, the methods section isn't just a procedure. It should be in paragraph form and not a numbered list of steps. And it shouldn't read like a set of instructions. You're telling the story of what was performed, with some justification about why certain actions were taken. It should be in the past tense, and while most of your report should be written in the active voice with personal pronouns, the method should be in the passive voice. Because the audience for this section is presumed to be familiar with basic techniques, the method section doesn't need the level of detail a full procedure would. The reader doesn't need to know about stock concentrations and volumes added. As long as they know the final concentrations, they can set it up any way they want. Assume the reader knows that pipetting is a way to transfer liquids, what common plastics and glassware are used in labs, and so on. Also, a quick note about units. Aside from degrees and percent symbols, there should be a space between the values and associated units. Finding the right balance of justification for the methods can be tricky. It's good to provide some context, but again, assuming an experienced audience, you don't want to over-explain. For instance, simply saying glutaraldehyde was added to the tetrahymena doesn't tell the reader much. Specifying that it was added as a fixative provides helpful context. But going into detail about what a fixative is and does is unnecessary. Perhaps the most important thing to justify here is the difference between the control and experimental treatments. Why did you choose to add this specific amount of the independent variable to the experimental treatment? Is it a physiologically relevant concentration? Is it the most you could add without harming the general health of the cells? Is it based on what past studies have used? If so, cite their work. Finally, be sure to include what statistical analysis was used to evaluate your data and what program was used to perform the analysis. Now let's move on to the results section. This part is closely tied to the evidence category of the rubric, and parts of authority and structure/prose also apply. There's both a written and graphical portion to the results. We've already discussed how to format a bar graph, and you should review that video from week 2 for more details. However, we did not address figure captions then. Captions go below the figures. Start with the figure number. Figures should be numbered in the order they are described in the results text. This can be followed by a figure title, but titles aren't necessary. Then clearly describe what is being compared in the figure. You don't need to be overly descriptive in your axis labels because you can give a more detailed explanation in the caption. Indicate the sample sizes here, and clarify what the bar heights and error bars are with the phrase mean plus minus 95% CI in parentheses. You don't need to give the exact values for the means and 95% confidence intervals. The reader can roughly tell what they are by looking at the graph, and typically don't need to know the precise numbers. The results text should be in paragraph form, and provide comparisons between treatments and the results of your statistical analysis. Here's an example of a good results paragraph. It describes which treatment had the larger effect. It provides a rough magnitude of the difference for emphasis, but doesn't go into the specific values. Instead, there's a reference to the figure that displays that information. The text should not repeat anything already present in the figures and captions. The next sentence describes whether or not the independent variable had a significant effect on the dependent variable, citing the statistical test used and reporting the key values. If ANOVA is used, it's important to include another sentence about the pairwise comparisons, citing the two key HSD results. While we indicate whether the results are significant here, We don't interpret the p-value in terms of the null and alternative hypotheses yet. That interpretation is reserved for the discussion. The results section should not begin with a paragraph like this one. Such a paragraph is difficult to understand without any context. Start with a brief recap of your hypothesis, experiment, and predictions. This shouldn't be as detailed as in your introduction, but an experienced reader who wants to jump straight to the results section should have enough information to understand the data that follows. For similar reasons, you don't want to start this section with your graphs. The best place to insert a figure is immediately after the paragraph that references it. I'm not going to discuss tables here because it's usually incorrect to include them for the type of data we collect in Bio43. If you're thinking of including a table in your report, consider if the data could be better conveyed by a graph or just described in words in the text. I hope you now feel prepared to start writing the methods and results sections for your report. Again, remember that your writing guide and rubric are key resources you should be referencing while you write. In particular, pages 5 through 11 of the writing guide has a lot of good information on formatting results section, including several examples. See you next time.